Eric, like we said, it's a pleasure to have you on this show. And you honestly were a huge inspiration for us. And I enjoy a lot of your work. I've seen a lot of the lives that you've been doing on TikTok lately and, stuff you've been sharing and really appreciate it. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up or what your interests were when you were younger?
Yeah, I'll give you the 10,000-foot view and then stop me anywhere you want to, or we can zoom in to some of those segments later. But
go for it.
I was in the womb in an IFB church. And so from the time I was born till the time I graduated high school, my parents were attending an independent fundamental Baptist church. They were on staff for most of the time that I was growing up. And so I literally spent 7 days a week on the campus, more time than I did at my house, like Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night at church, Saturday knocking doors to invite people to church, Monday through Friday going to the Christian school, all in the same building. So it was a bit of a bubble, and I loved it though. And grew up in that for a long time. Didn't question it. I thought we were the city set on a hill. I thought we were, better than everybody else. I thought we had the truth and no one else did. And I kind of just got a real hard slap to the face where when I got to 10th grade or 11th grade, like I think just about to start 11th grade, there was a sexual abuse cover-up where somebody was relocated from another church to ours. I Googled his name just to see, what happened or why he had come to our church. And the second result down was warrant issued for Chico youth pastor's arrest. And so as a teenager, I started going to all of my authority figures and just started getting shut down at every turn. You're bitter, you're not forgiving, this guy, you're trying to destroy this guy's family, yada, 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 and ended up losing a lot of my core relationships very quickly. And those last 2 years were pretty miserable. But in that time, as I was getting pushed out of that circle, I started researching basically like I had a podcast without a podcast. Like I would just literally Google like every speaker that was mentioned, every time a pastor like Jack Hyles was mentioned, I would Google them. And at that time it was like stuff Fundy's like, or Jocelyn Zichterman's book, or like a very small pool of resources. And I even remember going on the Fighting Fundamental forums at that time, and making a username. So like, it was a lot of learning about like our movement not being what it claims to be. And fast forward, ended up leaving, went to a more, a slightly less fundamentalist church. We could go to movie theaters and listen to good music and that sort of thing. And worked there for 2 years, and then ended up going to work with a missions organization for 2 years. And that really all imploded around the time of the Trump election because I didn't agree with standing around praying around the flag for the right candidate to win. But yeah, that was kind of the rocky journey through religion. And then when I started the show, Preacher Boys, I still identified as like a Jesus follower, but I didn't go to church. I was upset with American Christianity and specifically. And over the course of doing the show, I got to a point where I woke up and my default state was not, oh, I definitely believe there's something out there, like it just kind of became an effort to try to turn that back on. So yeah, that's kind of like the really broad brush of the last 29 years of my life. But yeah, I can zero in anywhere that you want to talk about.
Well, I'll let Kayla have the chance to hop in real quick. But one thing that I want to mention about something you talked about, you mentioned stuff fundies like. This is, it warmed my heart to hear you mention this website. And I don't know when I ran across this website. I feel like it was 2008, 2010, somewhere around there. And it was amazing. It was, in fact, Kayla, I was, when we were thinking of just fun stuff to put in the show, I went back to stuff fundies like and started scrolling through it, because when I read this website, for those of you, it's still up. If you guys don't know what we're talking about, go check it out. It is amazing. They'll have sections in there about watch night services that we loved. As for those who don't know, that's for December 31st. You get together with your church and you sit around listening to sermons until the new year comes in, and you play games like Dutch Blitz, which is also on there. They talk about the exaggerated urban legends, how there's a fire changes color depending on how hot it is, and you have orange fire you're used to, blue fire is really hot. Well, the reason hell is black is because the hottest fire is black. I heard that so many times growing up. Bullshit, not real at all.
I
And
just found out that's not true. Just
oh,
now.
see, this, yeah,
I just
Just
thought that
now.
was the case.
yeah. They had so, and the website is so amazing. It's not updated anymore. The guy hasn't updated in a long time, but it is a fantastic website. Another one that is still around, unfortunately, but kind of started out the same way as Stuff Fundy's Like was the Babylon Bee. The
Mhm.
Babylon Bee back in the
Remember that one?
day. Yeah, it used to be a really funny website that was just Christians poking fun at themselves and saying, oh, this kind of thing always happens in church. Isn't this interesting? And over the years, it's just turned to
Got really dark.
Yeah, it's just fascism now. That's the entire website.
The new owner is a mess. Yeah, Stuff Fundy's Like, I'm sad is not there, and Daryl Dow, who started the site, has been on my list forever as somebody I would love to talk to and interview and just talk to, like, what was it like running that? You were the only person for so long that had a platform that massive. Like, the amount of viewership I'm sure that site got for a while was pretty intense. And and then the Babylon Bee was, for a minute was really great, and then
it was funny.
sold. And I think No, not Joel Webben. I forget who the guy is that ended up. But that's a different guy.
But
whoever ended up buying it
to talk about Joel.
Really, it's sad to see where it's ended up. But
it is. I saw the Babylon Bee. It was last year, the year before. I like the president, the guy who owns it or whatever. He put this long tweet thread talking about how the black church is spiritually bankrupt. And of course, the black church is spiritually bankrupt. That's why they vote for Democrats, because he said that they were economically and socially segregated. So of course they were theologically segregated as well. I mean, this is just like, it's just racism and fascism. And hey, aren't Republicans great? That's the entire thing. It's not even pretending. All the articles aren't even comedy. It's like AOC is so stupid she can't tie her shoes. That's it. That's all the Babylon Bee is right now. But yeah, sorry, Kaz, I want to jump in if you want to go ahead with your questions on what he was saying. I had to throw in that comedy part with Stuff Fundy's Like.
Well, you kind of already answered it, but I just wanted to ask you more about when you started the podcast and what that process for me, like, even just doing this with a group of 3 other people, it was super scary. And we are several years later, and at least from my kind of narrow perspective, whenever I found you, I felt like you were kind of it. I wasn't finding a whole lot of other people, voicing concerns and making it make sense, drawing it all the way back to where these ideas start in sermons and in the churches and stuff like that. So I really just wanted to know, were you scared when you started all this, and especially now that I know that you were still a little bit kind of still in the belief system, what did that feel like?
I think I wasn't scared. I think I was just kind of angry, and I think it kind of came from a place of, I can tell you initially, when I decided to say anything publicly was when Sarah Jackson's story happened, and people can Google that name and see what happened. But it was basically an identical situation to the story that I'd come across as a 16, 17-year-old, where a pastor was abusing a teenage girl in the church, and the church was rallying around the abuser. And at the time of that story happening, I was already an adult living on my own with a wife and a infant at that time, and reading that story, I was like, somebody needs to talk about this. And I found myself in this position of, you mentioned being it, I was sitting there going, okay, there's news coverage for the individual stories. There's once in a while a paper will give enough resources to a Sarah Smith, who did what I think is one of the best pieces of journalism on the IFB, which was the Spirit of Fear article that she did. But no newspaper has the resources to keep letting a reporter do those stories. There's not enough people in the general public interested in those stories. At least that's what I thought at the time. And then I was like, so if somebody's going to do it and I'm waiting for them to do it and nobody can or doesn't want to, I might as well. And so starting the show, it was really just a place of frustration that this wasn't being talked about regularly, because I would see those stories, and it still bothers me because I call newspapers now and try to get them to look deeper. but it's like you'll see the really basic article. It's a paragraph long that says youth pastor arrested, and it's like, do a little digging and go, what college are they from? How many people from this type of college have been arrested in the last year? Like, I just was getting frustrated that it couldn't be dealt with, and I felt like it needed to be
It was
someone
still
from
so
the inside,
isolated.
yeah, to dive into it. What's cool about that though is like something was happening during that time, and whether it's providence or like just enough people fed up at the right time, but like you guys were thinking about starting a show pretty close to that time. The Leaving Eden podcast started right around that time. At the time, the Recovering Fundamentalist, I think, was going in a decent direction, when they were launching.
Yeah.
That's for deep in that rabbit hole. But like, there was a lot of shows that I think did a lot of really good work in opening a conversation. And now it's not just, it was just me for like, I feel like a couple days. And then it was like, boom,
Yeah.
now there's a bunch of others and people that didn't talk to each other. It was just, we all felt
Yeah.
this thing. And I still don't know what it was that pushed everyone over the edge. I think it was just the pressure it built to a point like everyone wanted to do something.
Yeah, there was like that it was like almost in the air all of a sudden. I remember like people calling me and reaching out to me that I hadn't spoken to in a lot, like randomly, to just talk about some stuff like that. So as far as the movement goes, the blind dive movement, or this, like, I think what we hope would be like a more general knowledge that it exists and it's very prevalent and kind of hides in plain sight. Do you feel like the movement is where you would like it to be now, or do you still feel like there's another wave of public knowledge to come with this particular thing?
The movement of like advocates, or the movement
As far as just, I feel like I still have to explain IFB very regularly, just like in my daily life when I'm talking to people about, having a podcast, like what's it's about. I still have to like do a lot of clarifying down. So I mean, personally for me, I would like to see it be just something that, and this might be a pipe dream because it's one of a lot of cults. There's a lot in America, but where there's just like more knowledge of it, and as something to be aware of, where do you think we're at with that?
I was just talking with everybody from Blind Eye actually last night. I had like all 5 people from their group talking about Let Us Pray and like awareness, and I was talking about like optimism or pessimism about where things are at. I think the IFB is in a weird place where like it is dying very quickly. Like the big meetings are not so big. Like the Sword of Lord conference is smaller than ever. Like big things like that, and they were never big to begin with. Like it's a small movement getting smaller. So like I'm happy that it is kind of dying the way it is.
Yep.
Obviously would love it to accelerate, and I'm trying to do my part, like to make that happen. But in terms of like the public, I feel like my concern is not so much necessarily getting like the person down the road to understand like here's what the IFB is, because they're never going to go into an IFB church anyway. That's certainly part of what I do, but I think what I'm excited about is the fact that there's so much coming out about cults in general. And I feel like the public understanding of what a cult is beyond just like, eyes wide shut, robes and candles, it's like, no, it's people understand like high control groups. People are understanding like red flags and narcissism and manipulation on a larger level. And I feel like that's the conversation that I want to see progress, and it'll do the work of affecting Scientology, the IFB, Mormonism, like all of those things are dwindling in major ways. But there's also, that umbrella needs to get bigger for a lot of people because they don't see it in their political affiliations or in their certain club, that they feel is better. So I think I'm optimistic as of this conversation, but like depending on the day, sometimes I'm super pessimistic and cynical. Like yesterday, I was pretty cynical in my answer. So just depends on the day.
Yeah, this thing with the IFB cult and cults in general, it is difficult because people's idea of a cult, like what you see in a film, isn't exactly, or even generally, what it's going to be like in real life. A lot of times the cult's right in front of your face and you don't notice it. I mean, we were in it, and at the time, I didn't think I was in a cult. I never considered it that way. And it wasn't even a fun cult. When you're mentioning Eyes Wide Shut, those folks at least were having a good time, you know. But
depends which character you are in that movie.
Depends which character. True. For the most
Tom
part,
Cruise did not have fun.
So that's an interesting thing, that the inverse relationship between the fun and the cults. Because if I go out and start a cult, it's usually me having a great time. Everybody else is suffering. But in those movie cults, everyone seems to be enjoying themselves except one poor dude, like Wicker Man or something like that.